Don't let your goodwill be a stumbling block for others. Today on the Blind Christian Podcast. Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Blind Christian Podcast. My name is Jason Smith, and today we are going to, as you can see from the thumbnail and from the title of this podcast, we're going to be addressing Tim Ross, but in a little bit different way that I've seen most people talk about what Tim Ross and the Basement are doing over here on YouTube and on the podcast networks. And before we do, I just want to thank everybody. I say everybody, but at the recording of this video, I think I've had one view on my last podcast. But thank you anyway to that one person who took the time to listen to me ramble, just to kind of get this podcast started. Thank you. I mean, humbly, I thank you. This is just as much about me as letting my feelings and thoughts out as it is that I hope that it could shed some light for some other people to come to Jesus and find their way as well. It's all a personal walk with me. It's my personal relationship with Jesus. I don't hold anybody accountable for what I need to do as a man in this world to become a solid Christian man, a leader for my family, my wife, and my kids. That's my sole responsibility. Now, I may ask people to help me on that journey, but it's my responsibility nevertheless. Anyways, if you're new here, please hit that like button and that subscribe button. Also, the notification bell so you can be updated every time I drop another episode. And please head on over to your favorite podcasting network, find The Blind Christian, give me a follow there, give me a good review, and we'll continue to chase down what the RLC is, real life Christianity. And that's somewhat of the focal point, too, of this episode is the real life Christianity movement that I'm pushing for right now. And you know, when I was thinking about, you know, how to describe what real life Christianity is, I automatically thought of Tim Ross. Now, I know a lot of you, some of you are against some of the things that he has said and done in the last few months. I am on the other side of that coin. I think that Tim Ross is solely misunderstood, and it really falls in line to what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about the first thing. I want to get the big elephant out of the room and go ahead and tell you what I think about the whole Jesus is a stripper thing, okay? For me, it's like it really depends on the person and where they're at in their journey with Christianity, okay? Because if you take the full context of what Tim was saying, you know, he wasn't calling Jesus the type of stripper that you automatically thinking he's saying, right? I think he brings up that other stripper where you throw dollar bills at. I think he brings that up on purpose simply to separate the two, right? You're willing to throw dollars at this stripper in a club, but he's talking about Jesus stripping away sin, right? He was going, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because, again, I too do not want to be a stumbling block for others, but I definitely want to get into what that truly means, okay? And Tim was basically separating the two, but talking about how Jesus stripped those things away. He wasn't calling Jesus literally a stripper in a club pole dancing. That's not what he was saying. That's not the context that he was trying to put Jesus in. I understood it. I hope that someday you all can find the place in your heart to understand it too and understand where Tim's coming from. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into where I think Tim Ross comes from and what Tim Ross is up to and where Tim Ross is at in his life. So many of you know, Tim Ross was a pastor, 7 years, pastoring his own church, and he stepped down to do the Basement. And he has used foul language. And it's funny because when I was watching an episode of The Basement, he was talking about all the attacks on YouTube that he was getting. I started to search those up. I was like, well, I understood once again. Maybe I'm on an island, and I know I'm not because there's over 200,000 people that follow his podcast. I'd obviously understand what he's up to and what he's doing and who he is, right? He's talking about being vulnerable, and that's exactly what he's doing. So I know I don't stand alone on an island, but this falls right in line with what I'm talking about. So I do a search to find out what are people really saying. How are they taking Tim Ross? And there's a lot of people out there that are claiming that because he's cursing, that he's misleading people, or that he's cursing. They can't rock with that. They can't rock with that. Well, Tim Ross says himself, "Hey, this is not a Christian podcast." And if you don't know what he means when he says that, then maybe that he's basically saying, then this is not the podcast for you. Please go. There's plenty of other places to go and get your content, right? There's other YouTubers and influencers and podcasts and other things out there. We're not supposed to put our salvation on anybody else anyway. We're supposed to find people to walk this life out with, to hold us accountable, to keep us upright, people that we can rely on, mentors that'll help us grow and help us through our walk. But it's always going to come down to your personal relationship with Jesus and how you're reaching out and talking about your sins with him and working those situations out. In most of these videos that I've watched, people have openly admitted that they struggle with cursing. And we can get into the whole curse word, because trust me, I know a ton of Christians that feel like cussing is not a sin. I beg to differ. That's just my stance. And again, just because I agree with what Tim Ross is saying about where he's at and what he's doing and what he said, he's been called by God. God had told him what he's doing is okay. And for a lot of you are like, oh no, that's that, listen to me. Okay. We should never judge what another man feels God is telling him to do. And if you go down and you understand the context of what's happening, have you listened to a whole podcast? I don't think some of you have. Or maybe some people get envious that he's growing so fast. I don't know what it is. But for me, I get it. I get exactly. It's called real life Christianity for me. It's called the basement for him and being vulnerable. More power to him. God hasn't called me to come up here and start cussing. And then if you listen to his podcast, it's not like he's cussing every other word or every other thing that he has to say is a curse word. It's not. And a lot of the times he doesn't even directly say it. He just references it by saying F this or B that or an A that or an A this. He's not out there blowing up your interwebs with a bunch of curse words or acting out of control or not using scripture. The man is full of scripture. Okay? So speaking of scripture, I'm going to bring in some to help my context of what I'm talking about when it pertains to what's happening over there at the basement anyway. And in reality, what I'm trying to do here with real life Christianity. So just listen. All right. So I'm going to read to you Romans chapter 14, verse 13. All right. And bear with me. It's really hard for me to see. So let's stop condemning each other. Decide instead to live in such a way that you would not cause another to stumble. So Romans 14 is talking about don't condemn one another, because that's what y'all doing to Tim, man. To be honest, you're condemning him and acting like he's a sinner. And let me tell you something from experience, true experience on both coins. I've been in situations where I've been around a group of Christians that come off like they have it so much together that it makes you feel like you don't fit in, like you don't have it all together. It sometimes can make you feel like you don't want to be a part of what's happening because you're not good enough, or you're such an underachiever, or you're such a sinner that you don't belong in this church, or you don't belong around these group of people that obviously have it all together. So it's not always that, hey, don't go around a bunch of Christians being a fool because you're going to make them stumble off the path they're on. I believe it's the other way around. Don't take your salvation so serious that you think that you have to pretend and hide your sin and start calling out people for theirs and allowing them not to feel like they belong, that they cannot, because they're still stuck in some sin, that they can't be a part of a congregation and learn what it is to follow and love Jesus and live that Christian lifestyle. That's what it means to me. And what real life Christianity is on my behalf is just that. I want to meet you all right where you're at. I'm a sinner, man. I curse. And again, I'm not saying I curse all the time. There's situations where I'm angry. Sometimes when I sat, let me tell you a little story about a young teenager I mentor. Not young, he's 17. He's about to become a man. Back in 2020, the world shut down, school shut down. He was sent home to do school on his computer. Meanwhile, as he's doing schoolwork on his computer, he starts to lose his sight, right? To the point where he stops logging in. He can't even see the computer, so he doesn't even get on at school. School contacts mom. Mom walks in the room. Hey, why ain't you in school? Mom, I can't see. This is a true story. I mentored this young man, okay? So she's in shock, takes him to the doctor. They find out that he has a tumor right up on the frontal part lobe of his brain, and it's pushing on his optic nerve. That's why he started to lose his sight. They go in, they remove the tumor. Sight does not come back. They say, okay, give it some time. Sometimes the nerve will revive itself and your sight will come back. Meanwhile, the tumor grows back. They got to go back in, remove the rest of the tumor, and start doing radiation. Meanwhile, they find out that that nerve is pretty much dead now, and he will never receive his sight back again. So here's a 17-year-old boy in the prime of his high school campaign, looking forward to going and getting his license and driving a car, finding out that he's not going to be able to see anything else ever again. He won't drive a car. Enter me, okay? Enter me. I take him out. You know, we have lunch together. My wife works with him at the school. That's how she connected him with me. I start sharing him my story, my vision, what I do at the blind center that I work at. We build this relationship. We're pretty close. One day I tell the wife, hey, I need to spend some alone time with him. He loves he loves hot wings. So I take him to Buffalo Wild Wings. We're sitting across from him, and I start asking him, hey, how are you coping with everything? And, you know, he's real quiet, and you could just tell by his demeanor that he's obviously not taking it well. I don't think anybody would, right? It's just a whole process. And again, selfish pug, if you want to know more what it's like living with sight loss in the spectrum that it is, you could head over to my other channel, Independently Blind, where me and my partner, Kenny, really help try to shed light on what it's like dealing with sight loss. So I'm sitting across from him, right? And I say, hey, I need to tell you something. I get his attention, and I say, being blind, beeping sucks. Fill in the gap with any word that you feel fits. His eyes that can't see go wide, and he laughs. Kind of breaks the monotony that he was feeling inside him, right? And he starts to open up more. And I start to share with him that it gets better. You learn new tools. You learn new ways to do things. Technology has come so far, and that there's nothing that you technically can't figure out except for the obvious. You're not going to be an airplane pilot. You're not going to be a police officer. You're not going to be driving a car. There's certain things that, unfortunately, that you're not going to be able to do, but there's so much more that you can do. And I also shared with him, through my sight loss, I actually found more of myself not having sight than I did with sight. So again, I used profanity in that situation to a teenage boy to really capture his attention and his understanding, and he related to it. Now, I'm not saying that that's how you should talk to teenagers. I'm talking about somebody that's dealing with some pain. He's dealing with pain. He's going through some sort of loss, and I needed to get through to him. I needed to wake him up. And for so many of us out there as Christians who are really doing an amazing job of giving it to the Lord, being diligent, going to church, Bibles, in life groups, mentoring people, and really figuring this stuff out, and maybe in a different place than somebody else, if we come off, I've been told one time by my family, you come off too righteous. And this was said, this is probably a decade ago. I was told by some family members I was coming off too righteous, and it bothered me. I didn't understand it at the time. I understand it today. And that's really what brought me to real life Christianity, is like, man, I have to be extremely careful of how I'm presenting Jesus to people, because presenting Jesus, who even says we will all fall short, I'm pushing these guys away. I'm making these people feel like they'll never get to where I'm at. And that's not that I'm being a stumbling block for them. And that's where Tim's at. That's why Tim's like, hey, the people that I'm reaching, that's not you. If this bothers you, if my language bothers you or how I'm doing this podcast say for you, this is not a Christian podcast. Funny thing is, a little inside look at the basement itself. It is a Christian podcast. That boy has got his Bible open all the time. He's reading scriptures. He's blessing people. He's talking to men about how to be men. He's got his wife and other people coming on talking about what it's like to be a woman. What it really takes to have integrity and to love Jesus. And just because he's sharing his sin and he's sharing his weaknesses doesn't make him not a man of God. And that's where I started to get I actually got a little heated. I'm not going to lie. I got heated because I'm like, this guy is out there meeting people where they're at. What do you think the basement means? What do you think ground zero means, right? Meeting people at the bottom where this all starts and being able to relate to them and say, hey, man, it's okay. We know that you have these sins. It's okay. I have them too, or I had them too. And this is how I deal with it. And you're watching not only Tim do that on the podcast, you see Hector and Sam do the same thing. And they're all telling you, hey, this is what I deal with. Hey, this is what I deal with. And they're all like, yeah, we're in this together. Come do this with us. We have each other's back. We're not afraid to speak out. And Tim's bringing on people that glorify God and has figured it out and done great things. He's also bringing people on to tell their story, to say, hey, this is my journey. This is where I'm still at. This is where I'm still at. I'm telling you, I myself am a hot mess. I have so much trauma in my life. Two in particular that constantly scrambles my brain. I can't get out of my own way sometimes, and I'm just being real. Does that mean I don't love Jesus? Does that mean I'm not really saved? No, that means I'm human. And because I have people in my life that I could lean on, it means I'm going to be okay. Sometimes I have to tell myself, hey, have you truly addressed those issues that you have? Have you truly put them to bed? And it's like I was telling the kid I mentor. It just sucks. And these things are always going to be there. I just have to learn to manage it and not let it control me, and rely on Jesus to get me through. And sometimes relying on Jesus is being able to pick up a phone, call a friend to tell a friend so they could tell me it's going to be okay. And remind me of who I am and what my purpose is. So, should we be making videos about Tim Ross or any other YouTube or influencer of some sort? Should we truly be doing that? And I think personally, the things that Tim has been attacked for has been things that are taken out of context or not fully understood, that all he's doing is meeting people where they're at so he can give them Jesus, which I commend. So is Tim Ross out of control? No. Just like the thumbnail says, Tim Ross is just misunderstood. And Tim is not trying to be a stumbling block for you. He's telling you, he's giving you the out right away. Hey, this just may not be for you. This might not be the season. You might not you may never understand what Tim's doing. And you might need to tell yourself that God did not tell him it's okay to curse, to do baddie words. Hey, that's between Tim and God. And I'll never tell another man what God told him or not told him, especially if I'm in a place where I understand. Because I'm going to always be that cat that's going to talk to you and be real too, and tell you that I'm not perfect, that the things that haunt me from my past are constantly lingering around. The devil uses it to get to me all the time. Go back to my last episode 1, where I was telling you I was having all these struggles with the camera. And do you know where that stems from? Do you know why I got frustrated and couldn't figure it out in a timely manner and it was bothering me so bad? It's because of my sight. My sight has become my biggest stumbling block many times. And I feel like I'm finally at a place where my sight loss doesn't control me 100% anyway, right? I help people the best that I can, and I do it by being real with them, and I tell them, hey, this sight loss stuff it is never going to go away. It's constantly going to be a thorn in your side, the way that Paul had it, right? But if God can take a man who was killing people because they believed in him and turned his life around and made it to where he lost his life for spreading the word of him, man, he could do a number in our lives. And this is just a thorn on my side. And I think this thorn on my side helps me not only help others that are dealing with sight loss, but I think it helps me stay closer to Jesus. As a reminder that no matter what I've been through and what I've gone through, he's always there. Anyway, I hope this podcast reaches somebody. I hope that a lot of people understand that what Tim's doing is special. What I'm attempting and trying to do is similar, but maybe in a different approach, right? I'm all about being vulnerable. I'm all about being me and not trying to pretend that I have something that y'all don't, because it's not true. You know, I guarantee you everybody is carrying something inside them that is causing them to have sin in their life. And that includes our pastors. So instead of condemning our pastors too, try loving on them a little bit. Try being that olive branch that helps them open up and be real about what they're going through so they can continue to do the work that they've been called to do. All right. That's all I got for this episode. Thank you once again. Again, please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.